Alright, so here we go. We're going to start on the space shooter game. So of course the first thing that I'm going to do is create a new drag and drop game. We'll call it Space Shooter. I guess I don't have a space shooter game already, so I'm going to go ahead and call it Space Shooter since I can. And with my space shooter, I'm going to, everything's loaded. I'm going to make sure of a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to make sure I have all my assets downloaded from Google Classroom, and I do. This is Game 3 Space Shooter assets. You'll notice that there's a lot of options. We're not going to be using all of these. You'll have the chance to choose which ones you want for the various things we're doing. So, also you'll want to make sure you have open your GDD for the Space Shooter game. It's going to give you guidance, tell you all about the game itself and what the game looks like. The main thing we're focusing on today is the player character, and the player character is going to be at the bottom of the screen. It's going to move left and right, and it should be able to fire laser blasts at an enemy at the top of the screen. And we got to stay on the screen at all times. So that's what we're going to do. We want to keep in mind that our player staying on the screen is going to be the same thing we've done before with other games, where we just check and see if we're going to go off the screen if we move, and then we will not move unless we are not moving off the screen. Or we won't move unless we're going to stay on the screen, I guess is the best way to put it. And then our lasers, we're going to use blue lasers that are fired at the enemy. And of course our sprites are going to be from a sprite sheet that's part of the assets, and that's why I want to make sure we have them downloaded so we can use those. And we'll go ahead and add sounds today when we do the lasers. Alright, so now we're going to go back to Game Maker and get started. So, first thing we're going to do is add a sprite for our player. This sprite is going to be a little bit different than what we've created before. This is going to be for our player. We name it SPR player. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do a straight import. I'm going to click Edit Image, and then I'm going to go up to Image, and we're going to import a strip image. And what this means is that we can import a list. Actually, I'm sorry, we're not going to import a strip image. We are going to import a strip image. So we're going to click Import Strip Image. We're going to go to our assets. We're going to open the sprite sheet. What a strip image is it's a set of images that we can use for animation. This is a common way that you'll see assets given, that they're already set up with all the frames of your animation, so that we can now pull these frames in. Instead of having to pull them in one by one, we can pull them in all at once and make frames. So with this, we see this is going to be our player up here at the top. You can see this one here. And you can see that the different images here have, really it's just this flame at the back that's like showing that it's like looking like that it's blasting up, and so it's blasting through space, I guess is the best way to put it. So we need these 4 images here. So that means we're going to need 4 frames. And they're all in a row, so we're just going to need 4 images in each row. And these images happen to be 32 by 32, so that makes it a lot easier. So as it turns out, they're 32 by 32. We don't need to offset by either horizontal or vertical, either by cells or by pixels, because we're already at the top left corner. We would input those or change those if we needed to move further down or further over on the strip. So now I'm going to go ahead and click Convert, and it says, oh, it's going to replace the existing sprite frames. And yes, I want to do that because there's no sprite frames anyway. Now that we've got that, the issue is that if we were to put this in an object and put it on screen, it would have this lovely crazy background and be flashing these backgrounds as well, because these aren't actually the same color. They're slightly off of one another. So we need to remove that. And we could either dump or remove, like we could erase everything, but the easier way to do it is to use the color remove tool. So when I click color remove tool and then I click on this color, it's going to remove all of that color from the frame. And because none of the ship has that color in it, we don't lose any of the ship. So I'm going to do that for all my frames. Just remove the color, and that gives me the background. Now I can see here, if I press play, I can see an image, and I can kind of zoom out so it looks more like what I'm going to see in my on screen. So that's my sprite. I'm going to go ahead and I'll exit out of here. We're going to go ahead and change this to middle center, and I think that's everything we need so far. So we're going to go ahead and add a new object for the player, OBJ player. Okay. Of course, assign this player sprite to it. And then we're just going to start with a create event. And in this create event, we're going to set this up like we did with the ball in the Brick Breaker game. We're going to go ahead and create a variable, assign a variable here, and the variable is going to be called SPD for speed, and we're going to start it at 7. That way we can have a base speed, and if we want to update the speed, we can always change the speed here, and then we don't have to change everywhere else that we use the speed. That'll just make it a little bit easier. Alright, so now that we have that, we're going to add a key down for left. We're going to move left, and remember, previously what we've done is we've checked to see if our bounding box on either side is at the edge before we start, or before we move, and then if as long as it's not, then we will move. So we're going to use widen this a little bit, widen that a little bit. We're going to go first and get I think I need to go get and then get a get instance variable. Went right past it, right here. Okay, we are going to get the left bounding box. So it's called bounding box left. There, oops, missed it. There it is. We're going to call it left, and it's going to be just a temporary variable because we only need it for this purpose for now, to check and see if the left bounding box, so add an if variable with left, check and see if the left bounding box is greater than 0. And as long as it is, let's move. So we're going to, in this case, we're not going to set the speed, we're going to just set the x coordinate to negative speed, because we want to move left and relative. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing for right. So we'll repeat this whole process here, which is we'll do bounding box right instead. We'll check if the bounding box right is less than the room width, and then we'll move if we can. So key down right, get an instance variable. This time though we're getting bounding box right. Variable is called right. Click temp for temporary. Use the if variable for right. This time we're going to use less than. And then we're going to go room underscore width. Okay. And then again we'll set the instance variable, this time x coordinate SPD, or not get instance variable, grab the wrong one, let's try it again. X coordinate SPD and relative. So now I should be able to move left and right. I'm going to go to my room, just because I want to be consistent with about this. I'm going to go ahead and rename our room game just for now. We can always rename it later. I'm going to change it to 640 by 480. That'll be our final room size. Okay, and then we're also going to cut this down to 16 by 16. Okay, that'll make it easier to snap things in. And so now I need a player object. I'm going to put the player object, I'm going to leave a couple of spaces, that's 32 pixels of space, and roughly in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and click run, and hopefully this works. And it does. We move left and right. So now that we're moving left and right, we need to fire a laser. Well, the first thing we need, though, is to add a laser sprite. So we're going to do the same thing we did. I'm going to add a new sprite. I forgot to rename it, so I'm going to rename it now. SPR. And now we need to be clear. I'm going to call this player laser because we will have an enemy laser, and they're not going to use the same laser, so we're going to use player laser instead of just laser. And then we're going to go in, I'm into the edit. We'll go ahead and click image, and we're going to import a strip image. Now, this time though, we're not taking a full set of images. We're actually just going to be a little hard to see here, but we're just going to take it, and I'll go right in. We're going to take this blue laser here. So it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pixels wide and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pixels tall, it looks like. So we're going to take that laser there. So one of the easiest ways to do, first of all, I'm going to change this. I'm going to go down to 1 and 1 here. We know this is going to be 5 and this is going to be 7. And then for my horizontal or for my offset, instead of inputting numbers, I can click. So if I click here, actually I'm going to click here to make sure, and it's a little hard to see, but there is a white border around. And I know that the numbers that I need are 5 and 65. So now that I know I'm in the right spot, I've got the right thing. I'm only getting 1 frame this time. I'm going to click convert. And once again say yes. Now this time, instead of removing all of the pixels of this color, I'm going to just remove the corners. So I'm just going to erase the upper, or all 4 corners, and that'll be my laser. Okay, and obviously this is not what the laser is going to look like on screen. It's going to look closer to this. Okay. Now, for the laser, we're going to exit out of here, and instead of top left, and we're not going to do middle center either, I'm going to do bottom center. And the reason for that is that when I shoot the laser, I want the laser to appear out of the cannons on the player's sprite. And therefore, when I shoot, I don't want to put the middle of the laser there, I want to put the bottom of the laser there. So I'm going to set its origin to bottom center. And for right now, I think I'm done. I can go ahead and create the object for the laser. OBJ player laser. And select the player laser sprite. So now, when I fire the laser, really the only thing the laser needs to do is start moving upwards. Okay? And so really, that's all I'm going to do. In the create event, I'm going to start it moving upwards. So I'm just going to choose a set speed, and we'll use a vertical speed because we're just going to go straight up. That just means I need to set it to a negative number. I'm going to use -4, and we're going to call it good. So I should have a set speed -4. Now, when I fire the laser, what that means is really I'm just going to create an instance of the laser, or 2 instances really of the laser, at the 2 cannon spots on the player's sprite. So I'm going to go into the player sprite to make sure I know where I'm looking at. So I'm going to click on edit image. And so I want the laser one laser to appear here and one to appear here. Which means I want to use this point, which is 6, 7, but that's not going to help me because the origin, if I go back to the player, the origin is at 16 by 16, 16 and 16. So if I go back in here, here's where 16, 16 is. right? And so I need to do some math. Let's see. So here's 1616, right? In order to get to here, I need to move to the left 10 and up 9, okay? And this one is going to be, from the center, is going to be to the right 9 and up 9. So those are the numbers I'm going to try to remember. Left 10, up 9, right 9, up 9. So I'm going to go back to the player object, and we're going to add an add event, and this time it's just going to be a key pressed space, and that way we can't just sit there and press and hold fire, and it'll keep firing. Okay, so when we press space, we're going to create 2 instances of the laser. So I'm going to grab 2 create instances. Okay, and the reason why I was using those numbers was because I wanted to use these relative boxes. So instead of firing from the middle of the player, I want to fire from the point that is, one point that is 10 to the left and 10 up from the player's origin. And the other one is 9 to the right and 9 up. And again, I click both relative boxes so that it's moving from the origin of the player to a spot that is 10 pixels up, 10 pixels to the right, or to the left, I should say, and 9 pixels up from the center. And then the same thing for the other laser is going to be 9 pixels to the right and 9 pixels up. Okay. Now, when I start the laser moving, laser's going to move. At some point, the laser's going to go outside the room. So I'm going to add an event for outside room, and that way when it's outside the room, I don't need it anymore. I'm going to destroy it. Okay, that way anytime that the laser goes out of the room, then we won't display it, or it'll destroy itself. So here we go. We're going to now demonstrate. So we're still moving, and now when I press this, we shoot. Okay, and that's pretty much it for today. That's all I had planned for today. So make sure you've got that working, and check over the code again. With the object player, you should have a create event, which is the assigned variable speed, a key down left that checks the left bounding box, sees if the left bounding box is still on the screen, and then says if it is, we go ahead and move to the left. And the same thing with key down right, we check and see is the right bounding box still on the screen. If so, then move to the right. And then the key press space for creating the 2 laser objects that shoot the OBJ player laser. That one, when we create it, we set a vertical speed of -4, so it moves up the screen, and then when it goes outside the room, it gets destroyed.